It's the totally terrific, triumphant, tough, talented, tantalizing, and tenacious, trend-setting Toa team, the Toa Mata. That's what we're talking about today in this episode of the Bionicle Inspiration Series. Welcome to the show. If you don't know much about the show, we showcase Bionicle mocks that the community has made to inspire you to make your own awesome stuff. And I figured, why not talk about the Toa Mata, because they're the ones that started it all, and they continued on in G2, and they continued on as Takanuva and all sorts of different stuff. So why not take a bit of a deep dive into the Toa Mata? And heck, in the future, maybe we could even take a deep dive into the Toa Metru or the Toa Nika, all the other dudes. Why not? But for now, we're going to cover mocks that people have made of the Toa Mata. The first one we've got is, of course, Tahu, the leader of the team here, Tahu Toe of Fire, by Callan LOF. So this revamp of Tahu here, of course, keeps with the original color scheme. You take a look at the original Tahu toy, and I've been saying so many T's since the start of that episode, it's weird to say T's now. Why did I start with Tahu? Take a look at the original Tahu. He's, of course, got those orange limbs, and I don't know about you, but I often forget that. I'm always like, Tahu, yeah, he's red, right? But I forget, he had little bits of black, he had little bits of orange on him, and Callan Lord of Fire here, of course, has included that sort of stuff, which is really cool, and really fitting for the character, which is nice. So if you are revamping any of the Toa Mata, why not do that? Why not focus on the original color schemes and embody that in it? It's one approach for sure. So of course, those of you who know Callan Lord of Fire, he of course does a lot of animation stuff, and so he specifically uses all of his Toa Mata revamps in his videos. So he's got to have them be sort of fairly posable. And Tahu here, of course, is pretty dang posable. We take a look at the arm design here. I really like the idea of using that orange engine piece there as a lower arm. It works really well, and the way that it's connected there, it's a pretty posable design. And also the way that the arm is attached to the torso there, and just also taking a look at the legs as well. There's not much that's really getting in the way of where the joint meets the next joint, or where it meets the body, or anything like that. So everything's a lot more kind of clear. Nothing's getting in the way that could limit any bits of posability there. Which, if you're aiming to have a really posable mock, that would definitely be the way to approach it if you want to go a little bit more custom. That's one way of doing it. Callan's also included the little heart light there on the chest, just the little stud like that. Always a fun little detail to do that, just kind of keeping it in the vein of how they were in the Bionicle movies there, having just a little circle of light that kind of represents their heart or something. It's pretty cool. And also the awesome chest design here as well, giving Tahu some really well worked out pecs and some abs and stuff like that. He's a tough guy, which is pretty cool. A really cool Tahu revamp. Let's move on to a Gali revamp by Railblade. So this one, of course, introduces a bit of Hero Factory. Now, of course, Callan's Tahu before did also have a bit of Hero Factory in it, but this one, it's a little bit more prominent and used a little bit more here. And there's nothing wrong with doing that, taking the original G1 designs and finding ways of adding in a little bit of flair like that, finding ways of adding in more modern pieces. How can modern stuff and new techniques and new designs and new parts expand upon the original way that set could have been made? I think this is a beautiful blend of more modern pieces and some of the older original pieces, giving new life to the original design here. It's pretty cool. I really like the tubing in the waist here, just this blue tube piece that's kind of fed through the waist and kind of working its way up towards the torso as well. I think it's just a really nice addition there. It just adds this slight pop of blue onto the primarily black waist there, and it just kind of creates this interesting line. It's just kind of cool. And I always think adding tubing into a mock can be not necessarily difficult but annoying, because the tubes typically are quite large and you have to feed them through multiple areas on the mock, and it's something you really need to remember as you're building so that you have areas for it to feed through, because it's such a large piece. You need to account for that kind of thing. So if you are able to kind of have a little bit of pre-thought as you're designing and kind of factor in those areas there that might need to have a little bit of an extra gap or a little bit of an extra hole or something to feed the tube through, it can actually look really nice like we see here. I think it's a fun little detail. So we were talking before on Callan's mock how it kept the original colours. Now, Gali originally had a little bit of sort of medium blue on her. This one, of course, doesn't. It just has a little bit more black on it. But I think it's pretty fitting, and there's no reason you have to stick with those colours just because that's what the original had. The black and blue colour scheme of this is really, really fitting and really nice, and it doesn't look any less like Gali originally did. It still captures the original look, so it's pretty cool. So it's that. How can you kind of embody the original but add your own little poetic license? It could be something as simple as that, just changing up the colour scheme or adding a few little details here and there, or just finding ways of honouring the new but embracing the old at the same time, which is pretty cool. On to the next one. This is Takanuva. Now, technically, he's the 7th member of the Toa Mata, so I figured I'd include him in the episode here. Why not? I like the kind of broad-shouldered look that Mr. Librarian bot at his Takanuva here. I love what he's done. It's this kind of more broad-shouldered look gives him a bit more of a heroic look and kind of this more sort of bold Toa design, which I think is really fitting for Takanuva. He's kind of like the hero's hero, So I think really paying attention to how exactly the body can communicate this more sort of heroic pose is a clever thing to do. And it's just as simple as just kind of buffing out the torso a little bit and making his shoulders a little bit wider, but not having them be too wide so it becomes more of like a T-torso or something. Just having it be just a little bit more prominent. It's nice. It's a fun little detail, and I think it actually captures the essence of the character very nicely. Also, this general design here, you take a look at some of the original Toa. They didn't actually have a huge amount of posability. They had no elbows, no knees. They still posed fairly well, but it really wasn't until a little bit later down the line that we got proper knee and elbow articulation. So there's no reason you couldn't revamp some of the original guys here and finally give them some articulation on the elbows and the knees here, which of course this version does. And I really like the arm design that Kopaka's got here. This librarian bot here has introduced a little bit of grey, the dark bluish grey here onto the colour scheme, which I think is actually quite nice. The original didn't have that. It was just purely white and the gold there. But I like this little inclusion of another pop of colour here. I think it just adds something else. It's cool. But yeah, the arm design here, just this simple, typical socket piece. Then one of these kind of L connector pieces that's like your typical pin, but then it kind of goes into a circle kind of in the opposite direction. And then it comes out on the other side as another pin there. So it's kind of like an L shape. It's a little bit of a newer piece. And then some kind of 1x2 little lift arm pieces there attached to one of those mixel joint pieces. So you get that mixel joint connection for the hand there. Doesn't use too many pieces, but it's a really simple and effective arm design there. And it still grants you a lot of posability. It's really, really nice. It's a fun little design there. You could easily replicate that yourself, provided you've got the pieces, but it doesn't use too many pieces, so you probably do. Again, adding a little bit more CCBS and Hero Factory to this mock here, mainly just on the legs here. It's a little simple amount there. Again, that can help with the posability, and if you are aiming for that a little bit of animation, or you just like posable mocks, adding a little bit of Hero Factory stuff in there is good. Because Callan's one, when we were talking about posability before, was a lot more customized, whereas this is just straight up using your typical CCBS bone pieces and stuff. And a few other pieces as well. But sticking with those kind of prefab elements there, it's a clever thing to do because they're designed to be very posable. So use them. You don't have to reinvent the wheel there. Just use what's already posable if you're aiming for posability. This is a really, really nice Takanuva revamp. Let's move on to the next member of the Toa Mata, and that is Pohatu. And this mock actually also includes his protector partner, Nilku. And this is by the Lego Brony. So there's a lot to love about this. I love the idea of really buffing out one of the Toa Mata and giving them kind of more of a Titan look. It's pretty cool. Typically so far with the ones that we were covering before, they were just your typical original design for the Toa Mata, but I figured why not include some of the other variants of those characters, the G2 look. Maybe you do like the Toa Mata, but you're like, yeah, I really wanted to do a G2 version because that's the one I grew up with, or I just prefer that version, or I just want to use some CCBS parts, why not? There's nothing wrong with doing that too. Remember, there's multiple different iterations of these characters, and you don't have to feel limited to just do one version. You could do multiple. I love the inclusion of the cloth. You can more effectively see it on the back here. It does sort of seem to go up towards the neck as well. It's a nice little addition there. It kind of gives him this kind of desert wanderer look, like he's kind of got this kind of torn up cloth and just kind of used it to sort of shield himself from the sun, and it's kind of been battered by sandstorms and winds and things, but it's all he's got left, and he's just a lone man gathering sand and walking through the desert, and that's what he does. I don't know, I kind of get that aesthetic through both the color scheme, a couple other elements, but that cloth I think really communicates that for me. I also love the inclusion of the chain and the golden mask there, just kind of around his waist. It's just cool, of course the original sets you just had it separate, it wasn't really attached to the mock unless you actually had him wearing it. I like the addition of doing that, just a way of them kind of having it on their person and transporting it. It's clever. I also like the inclusion of a lot of the silver on this. The original G2 Pohatu actually had a fair bit of silver on it as well. And so kind of expanding upon that here on this Titan version, again, kind of with that Desert Wanderer look, it kind of looks like some more ragtag silver armor that he's kind of fashioned out of just what he's found on his journeys. And now he's got some interesting looking armor. I think it's pretty cool. And of course, he's built Nilku here, kind of made him a little bit more tall, kind of just expanded upon things, given him a few new weapons, expanding on the feet a little slight additions, but nothing wrong with doing that as well. Maybe you want to revamp some of the original protectors as well and kind of expand upon their style and find ways of marrying it with the G2 Toa revamp that you're doing as well. It's pretty cool. So nice work there. Let's move on to the next one. This is by Enderlock124, and this is Kopaka Ultima. So I like the addition of some of these kind of fur pieces here. You see them mainly on the torso there. To me, whenever I look at those pieces, like I said, they're fur pieces or kind of like hair or something. But I don't know, when I see it here in the context of a Toa of ice like Kopaka, I kind of see kind of more like ragged, jagged, rough-looking ice or snow. And it's quite fitting and quite cool, actually. So it's an interesting way of playing with those pieces and putting them in a different context, and then as a result, it kind of communicates something very different. That's pretty nice. I also like the ice there coming out of his shoulders, and that's a cool place to put a bit of elemental stuff kind of oozing out. You got Pokemon like Infernape or something where fire's coming out of their head, or Pokemon like Charizard where the fire's coming out of the tail. But I just think another cool place to have, the element kind of oozing out of you is the shoulders there. It's pretty fitting and adds a bit to the character, looks kind of nice. Also, an interesting way of attaching the arms here. We take a look at the back of this mock here, and we see sort of typical connections there on the back, but there's kind of this additional joint here that helps to sort of bring out the arm, and it sort of seems to be covered up fairly well when you're looking at it sort of front on, but from the back you can see there is that kind of additional joint there, and that's a nice way of expanding upon the torso if as you're building you're like, it's not quite the right dimensions there, the waist needs to be a little bit bigger, or this needs to be a bit larger, but I don't really want to redesign it, I like how it looks now, or I just need a little bit more. You could just add an additional joint that's not actually there on your typical human, but kind of cover it up a little bit so that it looks a bit more natural. That's a clever little workaround you could do there. It's pretty cool. So this is a really nice Kopaka revamp. On to Onua. But this is Micro Onua by MC Lego Boy. So I also like that idea. Why not build a little mini version of the Toa? And again, this is the G2 Onua. Nothing wrong with the G2 Onua. He was pretty rad. Might have been one of my favorites. I say that, but I like Tahu a lot too. And Kopaka was good. Alright, they were all really cool. But yeah, a mini version's cool. You just focus on using some of your smaller CCBS pieces. They did come in pretty small sizes as well. And the beautiful thing about CCBS is some of those armor pieces, again, can be naturally quite small, but they actually would still work well on a larger mock, but also on a smaller mock like this. Specifically, the golden pieces of armor that he's got there. Those work very well on a larger Toa, but work perfectly well here on a Matoran like that. So it's interesting how certain pieces can be translated in multiple ways depending on your scale. So you play around with your parts, see which ones do work depending on the scale that you're using, and you never know what results you might get. But just a bit of trial and error, keep playing around with it and see if it works. And if it doesn't, try something else. I also like the kind of rocky shoulders that he's got here, using those sort of rocky parts there. Those are really cool pieces. And I also love the premise of Onua just being like, oh man, I got some missing shoulder pads here. I really could use some more armor, but I'm down in the mines. It's going to take me like a month to get back up and buy some armor. Here, I'll just use some stone as some shoulder pads. Let me just take this out of the ground and shove it on my shoulders. Well, yeah, why not? I say that as a joke, but I actually kind of like that. I think it's really cool. The idea of just his stone element either kind of acting as additional armor. Getting my D&D side out there, it's like when a druid casts bark skin, It's a bit like that, like using your elemental powers for your own betterment as like an armor or something like that. I like that. I think it's really fitting. And it's a bit more unique. It's a little bit more out there, but it's cool. It's clever. And look, that may not be MC Lego Boy's intent, but I like it. It's a cool idea. I also like, too, that he kept the original Onua weapons on this little version here, because they're very large weapons, and he's a very tiny mock. So now he has these oversized weapons. It makes him even more cute and adorable. And that's kind of the intent, just build a cute little adorable guy, because it's cute. And who doesn't love a cute, adorable little mock? I mean, when I look at this, I go, I kind of want to make my own version of a little mini army of Toa Mata there. It's cute and I want it. It's cute and I want it. That's the pickup line you say to women when you're looking for a girlfriend. That's right, the Bionicle Inspiration Series. We're inspiring you to build mocks, and we're inspiring you on how to pick up women. Which is a lie. Don't use that. I've never used that. I don't know where this joke was going, but there you go. Adorable little Matoran version. Not really a Matoran version, just a little like chibi tiny guy of Onua by MC Lego Boy. But we've done Tahu, we've done Gali, we've done Pohatu, we've done Kopaka, heck, we even did Takanuva. But which one's next? Some of you keen-eyed viewers, you'd be like, I know my Toa Mata, I know which one's next. That's right. We're missing a little bit of green, aren't we? We're missing Liwa, aren't we? Liwa's next. Well, you're wrong. It's Kopaka twice. Because why not? Liwa doesn't get to be in this episode, because So this is Kopaka Nuva by James Bailey. But of course, this takes a little bit more inspiration from the Fan Toca design as well. And the title actually is Kopaka Nuva, in brackets, Fan Toca. So don't forget the Fan Toca and Mystica, you know? I know some people want to because they didn't really like those designs, but I thought they were pretty cool. And maybe you think they're pretty cool too. And like me, you think, hey, they deserve their due and they need to be honored and included in this episode and in your collection. So, worth a try. I love the really big buffed up blaster that this one's got here. Really fun little addition there, and you know, guns are really cool, so why not build a big one and put it on a mock. I also love the inclusion of torso armor parts here being used on the legs for kind of really large armor. You know, typically you'd think, oh, it's a torso armor piece. I only can use that on a torso, but yet it's worked very well here as a bit of leg armor there. And I think it works really, really nicely too. So always take a look at your pieces and use them in ways that they shouldn't be intended for, because it works really well. And speaking of using pieces in different ways, the skull spider pieces there being used as armor parts there, and that's really, really nice. I think that looks awesome, and there's a really nice sort of armored texture to that part when you look at it from certain angles, which is great. And also the fact that you can kind of just sort of slot them on, there's kind of like a little bit of a friction fit there, is really cool. A funky way of attaching it for sure. I also like a lot of the mechanical details on the torso here, as well as the way that these sort of like tooth pieces form this like X shape on the torso. It just looks really, really cool. There's a lot of nice detail on that. It's nice. So yeah, a really awesome Fan Toca revamp version of Kopaka. Kopaka gets in this episode twice, because why not? And I lied, we do get Liwa in this episode. I just wanted to keep you on edge. Here is Liwa by Patrick Biggs. It's a really cool way of redoing Liwa's axe here. You know, typically Liwa's axe was green, but in this version, it's silver, uses some of those cool Chima axe pieces, and it's got a bit of brown there for the hilt. You know, it's probably fashioned it out of a bit of wood or something like that. Really, really cool. And I also love the way that Patrick kind of totally redesigned the whole frame of Liwa here. You know, giving him a more kind of hunched look, really different sort of shape to the legs. Just a very different look. And I think it really captures his personality and sort of the spirit of his element as well. I almost think the design looks a little bit... It has like elements of looking a little bit more kind of monkey-like to some degree. So he kind of seems a bit... you know, of course, Liwa's element was air, and so he was a bit more sort of free-spirited, but he hung out in the jungle and forests and places like that, and, you know, it kind of seems to put him in that setting a lot more, kind of giving him a more monkey-inspired look, and I love that. So can you do that? Can you redesign the character, but really heavily focus on how you can build it to embody their personality, or their element, or traits of their character sort of thing? I think that's a clever thing to do. And Patrick's done that to a T on this. I love it. So a really cool way of doing the arms there, you know, kind of using a foot part there and playing with the different connections on it to kind of link the lower arm onto the upper arm there. That's pretty cool. Also, Patrick's included a couple shots here of Liwa with the gold mask on, as well as Liwa with that corrupted mask as well, which pretty cool, you know. Of course, all sorts of characters had different masks that they wore, or, you know, there were elements of the story, like with Liwa, where he had that infected mask for a little bit. So maybe you could do that yourself, kind of play around with different masks that your characters could have, whether they're Toa Mata or not, or, yeah, if you are revamping the Toa Mata, don't forget their golden masks. So that has been all 6 of the Toa Mata, plus Takanuva, and Kopaka twice, because why not? Hopefully you enjoyed this episode of the Bionicle Inspiration series. If you want to submit some of your own creations to the show, you can do so through the email you're currently seeing on the screen right now. It's also in the description, so if you want to copy and paste that, you can do so. In the email, just include some pictures of the creation, any other information you want to include, add that into the email, send it my way, and one day it'll appear on the show. Also in the description are links to my social media, where I will probably post 2 Kopakas, because why not? You'll also find links to the mocks that you saw in today's episodes. Be sure to check out the other stuff that those builders have made. Maybe even leave a comment on their creations. Let them know what you think now that we've talked about it today. They're talented people. They deserve some love. Otherwise, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I did. I hope you did too. Happy building, guys. Bye for now.